everybody. Jesse Montaño here, Guerilla Sports. This is episode 1. We teased it at the end of last week. If you tuned in to Guerilla Sports Daily this morning, you heard a little bit of this spiel. But we're changing things up a little bit here at Guerilla Sports. We are becoming more consistent, more regular. We've got more shows on the docket. Like I said, I teased it last week. Big changes were coming. We are going to have a whole new content schedule starting this week. And I know right now, if you're watching, it's like, Jesse, I don't know if this is a big change. It's just been you multiple times. Today, you are right. We had Guerilla Sports Daily this morning, which will be a rotating cast of hosts, bringing you guys any and all stories of the day from around the world of sports. We're adding a show like this right here called Guerilla Hockey Colorado. This is an Avs-focused, Avs-specific show. We're here to talk about breaking news, updates, anything that applies to the Colorado Avalanche from the scope of the news. Here's what's going on. We want to give you guys as much of an inside track on everything Colorado Avalanche as we can. JJ Jerez and I will still have our normal show that we'll do on Tuesdays. That'll be a little bit more broad strokes. NHL, hockey in general, international, just really kind of whatever we want to talk about. This show right here that'll be coming to you guys right now in the off season every Monday and every Friday right here at noon. This is going to be very Avs focused, very Avs heavy. Here's the updates. Here's what's going on. Here's everything that you need to know. So that's what this show is going to be, as I'm trying to get a link tweeted out, but I'm just too excited. I'm just too excited to talk about it all. So let me do that. Put a period there. Got to capitalize because punctuation and grammar is important. And got to post a link. There we go. So that got out. Sorry. But yeah, guys. So this is it's going to be something that's going to be a lot more. Just hey, look, if you're wanting to know about the Avs, you come to this show every Monday, every Friday at noon. I'm going to have other guests with me sometimes. I'm going to have other hosts. There's going to be situations where JJ is here with me doing this show, talking about everything. But, we're going to get our other beat writer friends involved. Evan Rowell, Corey Massasak, Megan Angley, Arif Dean, Kyle Fredrickson, Colleen Flynn. We're going to get them all in here. We're going to try to get some of the altitude guys down here as well. So this will be a fun show where we're talking to you guys just about the Avs. We're not really going to stray too far out of the lines on this show in particular. Like I said, tune in Tuesdays. It's going to be JJ and I with the standard show that a lot of you have already come to know and hopefully love. That show isn't going anywhere. We're continuing with that one. But we just wanted to I wanted to add something in extra. I know that, I'm very lucky. I've got a lot of Avalanche supporters who have been here for a long time. Always hanging out, jumping in, seeing what we have to say. And so I wanted to give you guys something that's a little bit more specific, a little bit more pointed to what I know a lot of you guys are looking for. There's a comment in the chat right now that says, we got to get Mosier in here. I got to get Mosier in here for a couple different things. Mosier, if you're watching, text me. Because I got at least 2 different shows I got to get you in here on. This being one of them. So we will get Mosier in here at some point this summer once he starts answering my text messages. All right, let's get into it a little bit here. Colorado Avalanche, we are waiting for the NHL season to end any day. Panthers have a chance to close out that series and win the Stanley Cup again tomorrow after dropping Game 4. So we're just waiting for the season to officially tick into the off season. I was having the conversation with JJ last week where he was saying, I know the Avs haven't played for weeks and weeks, but it still feels like we're in the season because there is still hockey to be talking about. There are still news updates, fresh news updates that are coming out of the 2024 season. So while we're getting closer, we're not quite officially there. We're waiting for the calendar to flip over. I look at the calendar right here, and it is June 17th. We are 10 days? 11 days. 10 days from the NHL draft. Round 1 kicking off at the Sphere in Vegas. We will be there with Guerilla Sports to bring you guys everything, and the Avs are picking at 24. That was settled in when the Edmonton Oilers moved on to the Western Conference Final. The Avs locked in at 24. You guys know that in the past, especially these last couple of years, for those of you who have been following me, been watching and listening to my coverage over the last couple of years, you know that I've been in the boat where the Avs should be moving from those picks, using those picks to stockpile players on your roster that give you a better shot to win the Stanley Cup right now. That is the window that the Avs are in. They are looking to compete for a Stanley Cup championship right now. They will be going into next year, even with the cap uncertainty. Val Nichushkin, we're going to get into that. Even the uncertainty around Gabe Landeskog, the uncertainty around Gabe Landeskog being when he's actually coming back and what type of player he'll be when he gets back. But even with all of that, they are looking to contend. They are looking to compete for a Stanley Cup next season. So I've been in the boat of move on from those picks. The Avs made a concerted effort to not move on from their first-round pick this past year at the draft. At the trade deadline. They moved a 2025 first-round pick, but made a conscious effort to hold on to their 2024 first-round pick. There's a couple different thoughts there, right? You could go on one hand to, okay, well, are they trying to hold on to that so that they've got a trade chip at the draft, on the draft floor, should they be wanting to make some moves? Then when the cap is a little bit more flexible, teams are more willing to make moves. Teams, aren't locked in to a bunch of money and players and things like that. Teams are trying to make moves. So you could say, okay, they're maybe trying to keep a pick so that they can make a move at the draft. Or what I think is more likely is that they are recognizing these cupboards have gotten pretty bare. And I know that's been something that a lot of folks have talked about over the last couple of years. I really haven't seen it as a huge issue because it's felt to me like they've had, again, you have to understand the window that they're in right now. Jared Bednar told us as much last year. The NHL is not a development league. It's nice to have guys coming up through the ranks that you feel can jump in and contribute and can kind of help fill in, backlogged spots as you get injuries and players moving on and things like that. It's great to have those prospects, those players coming up through your development system to be able to jump in and fill in. But the reality of where the Avs have been at is really what you're talking about over the last couple of seasons when you're talking about the cupboards for the Avs and the prospects and, who do they have organizationally. The conversation for me and what I think it's realistically has been around what trade assets do they have? What assets do they have to use in the offseason to improve their roster? What assets do they have that they can use at the deadline to improve their roster right at the end of the season to make that push going into the playoffs? And I've looked back at I've looked at the roster over these last couple of years, the prospect roster, if you will, and I've said there's guys there that you can make moves with. Yeah, you're maybe not going to be able to outbid everybody, but there's players there that you can make moves with, that you can move on from. They move on from Justin Barron a couple years ago at the deadline to bring in Arturi Lehkonen. They move on from Alex Newhook last summer to create some more flexibility after realizing, hey, this guy maybe isn't the 2C. You've got Oscar Olausson hanging around. You've got Sean Behrens hanging around, who's going to be making the transition to pro hockey this year. I've thought the Avs have had some players that you could sell the upside on. What has been realistic? I'm not really quite sure what the right word is to use here, but it's that we all recognize that there really hasn't been like a true blue chip prospect coming through the pipeline for the Avs in a number of years. You can like Oscar Olausson. I think he's a good player. You can like Sean Behrens. I think he's a good player. Even Nikolai Kovalenko. I think he's a good player. I look at a guy like Sam Malinsky, who, again, if you follow my coverage, I'm very high on Sam Malinsky and his ability and his ability to be able to jump to the NHL starting this season, this upcoming the 24-25 season. Very high on Sam Malinsky. Sam Malinsky's a different one because he came into the organization last year and immediately started having an impact in the NHL. That's a guy the Avs want to keep around. My issue relative to that with some of those other names that I just listed, the problem has been where it's been hard to feel confident one way or the other about what they should do, what the Avs should do with these players, is you're being realistic. And you're stepping back and saying, I go back to, I believe it was last year, training camp, having a conversation with an NHL veteran about Oscar Olausson. And they said, great tools. Really, good, exciting young prospect. He's 2 or 3 years away. This was last year when a lot of fans, I think, were really kind of starting to ask the question of, can Oscar Olausson potentially push for a roster spot? And you watched him in camp, you see the shot. The release is obvious. It's a pro. It's an NHL level shot. There's still a lot of other parts of his game that just are still in need of development. Even a year and a half, 2 years, now technically removed from that comment being made to me. And now the same player made a comment to me of like, well, hey, if you could eventually develop that player into an Andre Burakovsky type, I think you feel really good about that. But how long are you willing to wait for an Andre Burakovsky type in that situation? Or is that an asset that's more valuable for you to move? Point being, that's kind of the issue with that crop of players that I just listed. Maybe Sam Malinsky excluded. He played 4 years of college. You get him as a college free agent. But Oscar Olausson, Sean Behrens, even a guy like Jean-Luc Foudy. I mentioned Nikolai Kovalenko, who finally comes over from Russia after 6 years, I believe. How long are you willing to wait for these guys while you're in a window to compete? A window where potentially moving on from some of those players could give you an extra boost to compete, to help get you over the finish line. It's been an interesting kind of tap dance the last few years. All of this to say, I think it's time. I think they held on to the first round pick because they all recognize it's time to get another high-end prospect in here. It's time for us to use a first-round pick and get another first-round pick player into the organization. And either start giving yourself an option for a player that's going to be, potentially become a trade chip, down the road, or get yourself on a track here similar to what you are looking at. There's one name that you'll notice I left omitted from that list. It's Callum Ritchie. Callum Ritchie, I think, is a player that the Avs have now identified as a prospect within the organization that they're saying, this might be a guy for us. This might be a guy that it's probably not this year. It's probably not this year. But maybe next year? Is this a guy that can not only be a player that we've drafted and developed and could step into the organization, but is this a player that could be an impact player on the organization at the NHL level? You're looking at Callum Ritchie like that, and I think the Avs are saying, we need another one. We need another one that isn't just, hey, maybe this guy could be an NHLer for us, but you need someone in the organization that you can start to dream on a bit. And can this guy have an impact at the NHL level in a reasonable amount of time? The Avs are picking at 24. Wade Klippenstein, who has long been the director of amateur scouting for the Avs, this will be his last draft with the Avs. So he's moving on to Notre Dame to become the director of hockey development over there. We've got still a couple shows, including a couple shows from Vegas, where we'll be diving into a lot more specifics of who might the Avs be targeting here. There's 3 names that I want to throw out there that are just 3 names on my board, and there's a consistency that you're going to notice across the 3, and I'll circle back to it after we've gone through them. There's a trend here. There's a specific archetype of player I don't necessarily know if it's an archetype of player. There's a certain quality in players that I like to see when you're drafting at this point in the first round, especially being a team like the Avs where they are in their competitive window. First one is Aaron Kiviharu. Kiviharu. Is a player that's played in the Liga for the last handful of years. Last couple of years. 5'10", strong player. Reminds me a little bit, size relative to the way that they play of a Nikolai Kovalenko. Plays a little bit heavier, plays a little bit meaner than maybe what their size would tell you. What I like about Kiviharu here, moves the puck up ice well, breaks the puck out very, very well. Really good decision making, doesn't put himself in a lot of bad situation where he's going to be making, bad decisions with the puck and putting his team, in an awkward position. That sounds just what I described right there. Does that not sound like a Jared Bednar type of guy? Smart decisions, good passing, strong on the breakout. Has a little bit of a mean streak to his game. That's a player that, as you're starting to look at this back end, guys that you moved on from, I mentioned Justin Barons a minute ago. This could be a player that you could start plugging back into the cupboards that say, there's a player that maybe we've got coming down the road that does a lot of things well that we know we like to do well. Next player on that list, Adam Jiricek, playing in the Czech 1 league this last year. 6'2", 168. Good height, not a lot of size there. You know that 17 years old, that's going to continue to fill out for Jiricek, but he plays with a really good pace, and he's, again, good vision, good touch. Not all that unlike, again, when I say good vision, good touch, I do. I think of a guy, and it's hard because there's one thing here that's going to break me away from this a little bit. But, I think of Burakovsky, where it's just a guy that can kind of wow you at any second, with that touch and suddenly pulls out a really nice skill play, but plays with good pace. And that's another thing. Got nice size. That's another, just being able to play with speed at the NHL level. It's such an underrated, hard thing to do. I was just having this conversation with someone over the weekend that the pace that is played with in the NHL is such on a different level than I think even most players expect, that if that's something that is noticeable about your game, that you can play with pace going into the NHL draft, one, I think that's a good thing. And then two, everything about what the Avs do, whether it be on the defensive side of the puck, their forecheck, or playing in the offensive zone, it's all done with pace. I like a guy that you can identify in his game. He likes to get up and down the ice, and he's okay playing as the speed elevates, playing against grown men. That's a guy that I'm always going to be interested in, again, when you're talking in the mid-20s. Last name I've got here for you guys, Emil Hemming. This is another player. He's going into his second year at the Liga. He'll be playing in the Liga again this year. Defenseman, 6'1", 205. I'm sorry, not a defenseman. He's a forward. I've got my notes all over the place here, folks. Playing in his second year in the Liga. He's a goal scorer, though. And when you go through and watch a lot of his plays, what he does, what caused me to kind of pause on Emil Hemming was he can shoot from anywhere, but he likes to shoot from distance. He likes to... The Avs play that high cycle. They like to get shots through traffic out high. Hemming has a bit of a track record being able to shoot from everywhere, get pucks through bodies. The other thing that, again, when you start going through not only the film, but then taking into account scout notes, this is a player that competes hard on the defensive side of the puck. So you're talking about a player that's got offensive upside. The number one thing that you notice about Hemming when you start watching and just going through some of his light film, which we always recommend around draft time, YouTube responsibly when going through and looking at some of these draft players' highlights. He likes to compete defensively while having the shot and the offense being a big upside to his game. Again, I've described 3 players here that all sound like Jared Bednar type of guys. They do this really well, but they also do this really well. This is the strength of their game. but they pay really close attention to this. Jared Bednar likes well-rounded players who can play with speed and who aren't afraid to prioritize the defensive side of the game. The through line with these three players, I told you there's going to be a through line here. No one dropped it in the chat. I don't know if anyone has gotten it. These are all three players who played their draft year in men's pro leagues in Europe. It may be overvaluing that for me, but when you're at this point in the draft, you're talking mid-20s, I just tend to err on the side because all draft picks, these are scratch-off lotteries. These are scratch-off lotteries that you're hoping hits. You're hoping that your first-round pick turns into a quality NHL player within 3 to 5 years, depending on where you're picking in the first round. Sometimes it can obviously be sooner than that. If you're talking, first half of the first round, you're hoping that's closer to 1 to 2 years. But the odds are, again, and I'll do this for another one of our shows this week. I'll go in and pull the numbers. It's the second time I've talked about it in the last week where I haven't had the numbers in front of me. The percentage of players that are drafted, forget draft position, forget draft round, percentage of players that are drafted into the NHL that go on to be impactful players in the league, it's a small amount. It's a small amount. So for me, when I take a step back and I look at selecting at 24, near the end of the first round, give yourself what I think would be the highest odds of hitting on that, which is a player that has been playing in pro leagues, is already getting used to the size and the physicality and the speed. To be taking a player that comes from that, I think just gives you the best chance of turning out a player that's going to impact your organization at some level, NHL or AHL. So that's, as we build up to the draft here over the next couple of weeks, that's probably where you'll see a lot of my preference go in terms of if I'm picking at 24, who I would be focusing on. The players at the end of the first round, if they're still there, that have that pro experience, that have that experience playing against grown men, I just always tend to lean that way a little bit because I do think that there is there's a difference between cutting your teeth against grown professionals, guys who have played in the NHL, guys who have played at a high level, American League, things like that. KHL, I just think that is better for your development when you're talking about guys who we're kind of hoping and wishing and dreaming on anyways at the end of the first round. Real quick question in the chat, is Matt Davis eligible to be drafted? Would love for the Avs to draft a goalie. Look, folks that I'm talking to, I don't think that's off the table. The Avs are finally, it looks like, graduating Justus Annunen to the NHL for a full-time job, at least as the backup. You guys probably heard me talking last week. There is a chance that Justus Annunen is going to be given the opportunity to push for some starts. He's gonna be able to push Alexander Georgiev a little bit here. So we'll see. But that means that the prospect that you've had, kind of coming through your ranks this whole time, likely isn't going to be a prospect anymore. I'm trying to find here. I don't believe. Let's see. How old is? Oh, I'm sorry. Matt Davis. Wow. It's good. Matt Davis, 23 years old. So that would not be someone you're looking at for a draft prospect. He's coming into his last year at DU. That's a guy that you'd be looking at as more of a college free agent after this season. But I have heard some rumblings that the Avs maybe wouldn't hate the idea of adding a goaltender back into their prospect pipeline to start replenishing the void that'll be left by Justus Annunen. So those are my three that just kind of jump off the page to me right now on June 17th, between now and 10 days from now, which actually isn't that long. I'm sure we'll have, there will be updates to what we're doing. We'll get a little bit more into kind of casting a wider net of maybe here's 5 to 10 guys that the Avs could be potentially looking at there at 24. Keep an eye out. The Avs, they signed Yuri Inala last week. they love those European and college free agents. We're kind of out of college free agent season at this point. Maybe a couple more trickle in, but keep an eye out for the Avs. Maybe trying to tap that Euro free agent market a couple more times before the summer comes to a close. Just real quick, Avalanche prospect programming note. This news was broken earlier this summer. I believe it was Colleen Flynn from the Hockey News that I saw had this one first. Taylor Makar, younger brother of Avs defenseman Cale, maybe you've heard of him, has transferred from UMass to Maine. He'll be in Maine this year for the start of the college season. Last 2 seasons really been an interesting kind of up and down tale for Taylor Makar. 2 seasons ago, 22-23, he had 10 goals, only 12 points, but really felt like, hey, this is a guy that's starting to find his scoring touch at the NHL. Jeez, oh my gosh, I'm all over the place, folks. It's Monday. At the college level, starting to find it. Maybe starting to turn into a true power forward. He looks more at home at a top Division I program. Takes a step back last year, just 4 goals on the season, 5 assists for 9 points. So it was a slowdown for him. He came into rookie camp last year starting to look like a guy, and I even talked to Brian Wilsey about this, one of the Avs heads of development. You know, he was saying we're now starting to look at this guy as potentially, you know, a pro hockey player down the road. I'm not saying that that's off the table, but I just can't imagine that you feel as good about Taylor Makar coming into this year's rookie camp as you did going into last year's. So we're going to wait and see, obviously, see how this goes in Maine. This is a decision that the Avs are definitely sorry, I'm getting caught up here in the chat. Dang it. Oh, Maine. Yes. Evan popping in this chat. I just got so excited to see Evan in here. I got completely distracted. Maine is still a really good program. The Avs definitely had a say, or at least were part of the conversation of him leaving one situation to go to another. We talked about this a little bit on one of the shows last week, that yes, the Avs do have a say in the development of prospects, even if they aren't directly involved in the organization. So they were part of this process. He's probably going to get more playing time, probably going to be up the lineup a little bit. It's not as dominant of a program, which is so funny to say given what we were talking about when Cale Makar was first going there. But this is going to be an interesting move for Taylor Makar. He was the last player taken in the draft. We're going to see if he can continue to kind of carve out a little bit of a career here and eventually build up and earn a pro contract. The Avs would love to give him one just as the story. Having Cale come in, then Taylor Makar coming in and turning into a real player there. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on that. I was really high on Taylor Makar last year at development camp, at rookie camp. I thought he was a really good story. We're going to keep an eye on him this year and see how things go in Maine. You hope for him, for the player, that he can find a home where maybe it makes a little bit more sense for him. But that was officially announced by Maine, University of Maine. I believe it was yesterday, but that was being reported on before the Avs were even eliminated. We did a mailbag this week where we had a couple questions, one of them being about Val Nichushkin, and I mentioned this on the mailbag, but I just wanted to kind of circle back and re-mention it here. There's been a lot of conversation about, what is Val Nichushkin going to do? What's kind of going to be the plan? How are the Avs going to handle this? How is Val Nichushkin going to handle this? And I think that's maybe one part of this that we haven't maybe given enough life to is, what's Val Nichushkin thinking in all of this? Does he want to deal with any of this? Does he want to have to, because you're now at the point where at the beginning of the season, he was able to do the media went into the locker room. He was there, he was available, and he was able to do the, guys, I don't want to talk about it. It's behind me. It was a personal matter. We're moving on. And I think everyone kind of let him not get away with that. Everyone was all right with it. Everyone was willing to say, hey, look, personal moment. You had a dark day. We're willing to move on. Everyone's going to drop it, move past. Genuinely, guys. I was in that locker room more this past year than I ever have been in my career. Everyone was respectful of it. Everyone said, hey, Val, you said you wanted to move on? That's fine. We're going to move on. We don't need to be rehashing it, digging things up, coming in and poking and prodding and asking every day. We're going to let it go. That's not going to happen this time. This is 3 times in 13 months. Even the second time he came back, I don't want to talk about it. And we said, okay, we'll drop it. You went to the player assistance program. We're willing to say, we're not gonna make you relive that. 3rd time in 13 months. I don't know if he's gonna want to deal with that. Is the point. So we'll see, how that goes. But the update that I wanted to give, I was told Val Nichushkin has gone back to Russia. He's back there for the summer. I don't think this is anything unexpected. He usually goes back to Russia in the summers. That's where his family is. It's where he's from. I know he's got responsibilities there in the summer, but he has gone back. I was also told, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, there are KHL teams that would be more than happy to take on Val Nichushkin should he decide, I would rather just go back home, be close to family, be close to friends, continue to play hockey over there, not have to deal with the player assistance program stuff. So we'll see. I've been told he's back in Russia. I guess we'll have to wait to see if he comes back. Right now, my expectation, again, on June 17th, 2024, is that he will be back. And there was a kind of loose report a week ago that maybe the Chicago Blackhawks had kicked around on Val Nichushkin, and those reports were maybe rebuffed a bit. But what that just tells me is that there would be NHL teams willing to take on the risk of this player, especially a team like Chicago. I think that would make a lot of sense. There's no expectations. Your best case scenario is you would add a guy like Val Nichushkin, and he'd help you get back to the playoffs. Now, again, what I think there'd be a lot of Avs fans, I would say, was, well, we'll see if he's available in the playoffs. But if you're the Chicago Blackhawks and suddenly Val Nichushkin isn't available, he's suspended for a year, fails another test, and that comes right after the trade deadline, that's a bummer. You weren't expecting to win the Stanley Cup. So that tells me that there's teams out there that are at least going to kick tires on it. He may just decide that the KHL makes more sense for him. But like I said, my expectation is that he will be back in the NHL at some point next year, no earlier than November. Will it be with the Avs? I'm not sure. I'd put that at probably 50-50 right now. I do think that over the course of this summer, the Avs are going to try their hardest to get some clarity on that. And I think the only way you really get clarity and feel good about the clarity is by not having the contract weighing you down. So Val's in Russia. We'll see how this all plays out over the summer. Question in here from your view, did the team ever lose trust in him? Look, I've made this comment a couple times that I think if you go back to what was being said in the locker room in Seattle, yeah, I think there was a lack of trust. But I also think that that's a group in that locker room that wants to fight for each other, that wants to believe everyone's pulling the rope in the same direction, that wants to believe everyone in there has their back. What I think the difference is now is not only has the trust been broken, I don't know how you get it back. At this point, how do you get it back? The first time, like I said, I'll see if I can dig it up. It might be hard for me to find. Those interviews after, I think it was game 3 in Seattle last year in the playoffs, it wasn't very hard to read between the lines that guys were upset. Guys were pissed. But they tried to be supportive. They tried to chalk it up to, he needs help. We're going to get him help. We're going to give him every bit of support, every resource, everything, because he needs help. Nathan MacKinnon told us on Media Day last year, we're ready to welcome him back with open arms. We're ready to welcome him back with open arms. When Gabe Landeskog was asked that just a couple weeks ago, paraphrasing, he said, we'll see. See how Val handles this. It's up to him now. There's a certain level of personal accountability, and that's the part that I think maybe that's where the trust hadn't been broken before. There was a lack of trust in that, like, oh, come on, man, like, you know, at the worst time of year, we need you to be better. But I think they still believe that he could be personally accountable enough. I don't think they feel that way anymore. So that's the number one reason why I think this is going to be such an interesting thing to follow this summer, because, you know, Chris McFarland told us, Avs GM told us that there's a real possibility Val Nichushkin is back with the Avs. I think the number one reason why they're going to try to avoid that is I just don't know how you walk him back into that locker room. Forget the organization. Forget the people that signed his contract. How do you walk him back in there with that group of players, knowing that those are the guys that are going to war every night, that are killing themselves, making every sacrifice, mental, physical, your family, emotional. They're doing everything. And 2 years in a row he's done this. I don't know how you walk him back in. Last question on this one, then we'll move on, because this is a good question. I'll be honest, I don't know right now. I'm going to look to find the answer. How does the PA handle drug testing when he's in Russia? I don't know the answer to this. I also don't really know what I'm not fully sure. They keep this part of the PA program pretty tight-lipped. How often they are testing, you know, how are they getting in contact with him? If he's there, that tells me the PA has, they're aware. You know what I mean? Like there's some type of agreement worked out where he can go, you know, about his summer and, you know, his workouts and about his normal routine, but they've definitely got something worked out. He's suspended by the league and the PA. So I'm not sure, but I will do some digging to get this figured out for you guys. Last thing here before we wrap up today's, like I said, this is an inaugural show. Feels a little bit familiar, but this is episode 1, Guerilla Hockey Colorado. We are talking all things Avs. We're really not on this show in particular. Mondays and Fridays, right here at noon. We're not going to stray too far from the Avs conversation. We will be getting into broader NHL and hockey stuff on our show that right now in the off season will just be airing on Tuesdays. That's with me and JJ Jerez. That one will be getting a slight rebrand, so keep an eye out for that. May not be by tomorrow. We will have an episode for you guys tomorrow. That show will be getting a slight rebrand, just some refresh on the graphics and theming and some of the stuff like that. But every Monday, every Friday, right here at noon, we'll be talking all things Avs from the top of the show to the very, very, very bottom. So make sure you guys are tuning in every Monday and Friday, and then jump in on Tuesdays as well for more generalized hockey content. We're going to have our Bronco show going here at 2. We got our Nugget shows that'll be kicking up this week. We got Hoops Your Daddy with Liv Moods, all kinds of fun stuff coming every single day now from Guerilla Sports. 5 days a week, we will have content right here on this channel at 9:30, noon, and 2 Mountain Time. And as the network continues to grow and change, and as we get closer to the season, our Broncos show will be going to 5 days a week. As we get closer to Avs season, we'll be adding another show with myself and JJ throughout the week, and hopefully even adding in some more folks as well to all the fun. But let's wrap this one up today. Real quick, talking about salary cap. Salary cap in the NHL going up to $88 million. Next summer, it is projected to be somewhere around $92 million. That is massive for the Avs. Doesn't solve their problems, but it's big. This year, that little bit of a bump gets you essentially the Devon Toews raise that you signed at the very beginning of this last season. That helps take the pressure off of that. And then going into the following season, Mikko Rantanen is due a raise, so getting that additional $4 million bump will help. There's a couple players here, 3 players in particular that I didn't just list that I want to highlight. So obviously we know the Mikko Rantanen extension is coming. The other one with that, only 1 season left of Logan O'Connor at $1 million. He's definitely getting a raise. Probably won't be too much of a raise, but don't be surprised to see Logan O'Connor push closer to $2 million, especially with the season that he was having last year. If I'm the Avs, I'm probably wanting to get that one signed sooner rather than later. If you can get that deal done before the season starts, I think that's going to be best case scenario. With what we saw from Logan O'Connor, especially him playing with Miles Wood, Ross Colton, there is a real chance that production goes up, and that player, you don't even want to think about it because he has been such a picture-perfect fit from the very beginning. You don't want to risk Logan O'Connor pricing himself out of your ability to keep him. He is too valuable of a player. He does everything, I mean, almost not too well for you to get rid of, too well for you to lose. He exemplifies exactly what the Avs are trying to do. Game in, game out, day out with the work ethic. You need to prioritize getting something done with Logan O'Connor sooner rather than later. We all know Jonathan Drouin, that money, it looks like they're probably going to be able to get something done. But as we got here in the chat, going to need to scrounge through the couch cushions to make that money work for sure. Alan Walsh on his show last week said, when both sides want to make deals happen. It's not guaranteed. We still got a couple weeks before July 1. But my hunch, folks I've talked to, tells me that deal probably gets done with Jonathan Drouin. I'm picturing that one somewhere between 4 and 5 years. Anywhere from, I'm going to put a range of, I want to say 4 to 5, but I just don't know if that gets it done. Like, it might, like, for the Avs, on the Avs side, you might be need to be talking about a range that's 4 to 4.5. I just don't know how much they can go beyond that. You know what I mean? Like, I have my range in my notes here written as anywhere from 4 to 5. 5 just might be too rich. You maybe might see the Avs give a little bit extra on the term, to keep it at 4.5 or less. That's going to be a tough one, but I think it gets done. I do think both sides are motivated to get that done. I think it makes too much sense having Jonathan Drouin here in Denver. The other one that will need to get done before the season starts is Casey Middlestat. He's an RFA. He's got arbitration rights, so the Avs can feel fairly confident in the fact that he's going to be back. It's just a matter of how much and for how long. If you go through a lot of Casey Middlestat's comparables, you're probably talking 4 to 5 years, anywhere from 4.5 to 6, and I'm putting that as an intentionally wide range. I'm not sure if it gets all the way up to 6. I'm not sure if it gets all the way as low as 4.5, but somewhere in that range is the going rate for a player of Casey Middlestat's ilk to this point in his career. So, we're going to have to see where that one does land. Like I said, he's got arbitration rights. You could see that play out. Arbitration is not necessarily a bad thing, especially in the situation that these two sides are in. Casey Middlestat comes in at the trade deadline, so you don't have a super large sample size. He had a really strong start to his time with the Avs and hit a real lull there in the middle. I thought he was fantastic in the playoffs. So there's going to be some arguments that both sides can make to keep the money either going up or going down or whatever. So Keep an eye on those two guys. Drew and Middlestat have to get done before the season starts. Mikko Rantanen and Logan O'Connor are going to be guys that I imagine the Avs are going to want to get done likely before the season starts, if not around the same time when the Devon Taves deal got done, which was right after the season got going this last year. Other notable UFAs for the Avs, not notable UFAs, here are the other unrestricted free agents in addition to Jonathan Drouin. Yakov Trenin is the other one that I can see the Avs trying to make a run at 2 or 3 years, anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5. Anything beyond that, too expensive, way too rich for my blood. Andrew Cogliano, I've got an asterisk here because if he's not retiring, I imagine he'll be back. I think this is just too good of a fit for everyone. I can't imagine Cogliano would want to go somewhere else for the last year of his career if he just does decide to come back. Jack Johnson is the other one that I'm not sure. We're gonna wait and see if Jack Johnson is even back next year in the NHL. That would be another guy that I thought this past year was his best stint with the Avalanche. At a league minimum deal, I have no issue with them bringing back Jack Johnson. You got to see if he wants to come back and what that money would be. I have a mustache hair that is tickling up the inside of my nose. So I don't know if you guys see how much I'm messing with this right now. It's driving me insane. Brandon Duhaime, we were just being asked about this one in the chat. Any chance Duhaime stays? Look, this is another guy that I think they like. I think he fit in well. I think they'd love to keep him in a perfect world. There's probably just not going to be a lot of room to bring back a guy like Duhaime. I could be wrong. They could surprise me. But guys like Brandon Duhaime are relatively easy to find every year at the deadline. These last three, I don't expect them to bring back any of these three. Sean Walker, I thought he was good. He was not great. To me, that's the Sam Malinsky spot right there on the back end. I think Malinsky fills that in totally admirably starting this season. Yoel Kiviranta, I really thought he struggled in the regular season, just being honest. Thought he really struggled in the regular season for large stretches, but he was a solid contributor in the playoffs. But I just don't think that they bring him back. He was never really supposed to be a big part of the lineup anyways. And then Caleb Jones, unfortunately for a Colorado native, just never really quite fit in. The inconsistency was just too glaring. He would have stretches where he was really solid, really good. You'd say, this is clearly an NHL defenseman. He's not even their worst NHL defenseman. And then he'd have games where it was like, that's their worst NHL defenseman for sure. You probably can't play this guy every single night. And Caleb Jones even admitted as much at the beginning of the year. His issue has always been consistency in his NHL career and keeping that play at the super high level that it needs to stay at to be an NHL regular. Whew. I think that's it, guys. I think that's about it for today, day one, episode 1 of Guerilla Hockey Colorado. We will be back on Friday at noon. JJ and I will have our regularly scheduled hockey show tomorrow, also at noon. And make sure you guys are tuning in every single morning now for Guerilla Sports Daily, 9:30 a.m. live on X and on YouTube. We'll be bringing you guys just any updates, rotating cast of hosts. We have some really fun, talented people here at Guerilla Sports, different hosts every single morning, and we're going to be bringing you guys just every single story that we find interesting from around the world of sports to kick off our production days every single day here at Guerilla Sports. So that's at 9:30, and then our next show will be at noon, and the show after that will be at 2. For right now, as we continue to add more and change, that list will only begin to grow. But right now, make it a routine every single day. Guerilla Sports, 9:30, noon, and 2. We will see you guys here this afternoon in just a little bit for Guerilla Football Denver with BK, Liv. We're going to have Nate Jackson. Nate Jackson is out of town, so he won't be here today. But super excited for it, you guys. All kinds of great stuff coming for you with Guerilla Sports, and today is just the start of it. So thank you guys all so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys on Friday, and we'll see you throughout the week at a bunch of other stops. But Jesse Montaño, Jay behind the board, running everything, making sure you guys can see us and hear us. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys later.